Bishop Warfel, thank you for joining us on this Holy Thursday. We have finally gotten to the end of our Lenten journey as we are entering into the liturgy of Holy Thursday, and I appreciate you taking time to visit about that.
Well, Lent has been a wonderful time to prepare to celebrate this holy time of the Church's year.
So yesterday we heard Bishop Fleming talk just a little bit about an overview of the Triduum and how each of these celebrations are really one liturgy. Tonight we started off with the Feast of the Lord's Supper.
Correct.
And so what are the elements of tonight's celebration that we'll see at Mass?
Well, I think it's important to even know the context. At its roots, is connected to what takes place on the Passover meal, the Seder meal, the Jewish community has been doing for thousands of years. You find that in the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. And the context of the Mass of the Lord's Supper is a representation of Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples. And at that supper, he connected everything that would be happening in the following days, his passion, his death, and then his rising from death, with that supper. And so every time we celebrate the supper, as he told us to do, that we are representing, or maybe even a better word is actualizing his Paschal mystery.
And so we, in Mass, almost reenact what happened in the upper room, right? The priest takes off his chasuble and washes.
Correct. That's the washing of feet. It's interesting in the Gospel of John is where we have the washing of feet is from the 13th chapter of John's Gospel. And interestingly, John's Gospel does not have an institution of the Eucharist like Matthew, Mark, and Luke do. So, but what John's Gospel does, essentially, it gives us a catechesis on the Eucharist. We heard earlier in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel, they said, I am the bread of life. You know, no one comes to the Father except through me. And in the 13th chapter of the washing of feet, he demonstrates what it means to be Eucharistic. So as we receive Holy Communion, the body and blood of Jesus, that we are we are being assimilated into Christ, not him being assimilated to us. And he shows us what it means to be his follower. We're to be foot washers.
Yeah, become servants as he
Correct.
Models for us. And then he does go on into this beautiful gift that he gives us in simple bread and simple wine, which is, we as Catholics fully believe that it's not symbolic, right?
No, it's going back again to the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. He was very clear that this is, as we receive him, it is his true body and blood. It's not fake. It's not just a mere symbol. It's communicated through symbolism of the bread and wine, but it's transformed into Christ's very body and blood sacramentally.
Surely those early apostles didn't understand what was going on, right? Or do we think that they were able to grasp what Christ was saying in those moments?
I'd say not fully until later.
Yeah.
I hate to keep drawing back on the 6th chapter of John's Gospel.
It's a very rich chapter.
There are those who, what he was saying about him being the bread of life is, and that this is true bread and true blood, eat my body and eat my blood. They said this was too much for some, and they walked away. But he didn't hedge on or fudge on what he was teaching them. So I would say that the disciples regularly did not really understand what he was saying. In fact, they wouldn't have understood totally until after his rising from the dead.
And I bring that up simply because surely there are plenty of us sitting in the pew who don't understand it, or even priests who don't understand it. And that's okay, that we don't understand it while not rejecting it. It's important to believe that it is what it is without us needing to fully understand it.
Yeah, the Bible is very clear on, I think, on this point. And we may not be able to totally understand it or grasp it or perceive, but we are called to believe and then to grow in our understanding. It's really a divine mystery that we're talking about. And because we're talking about an eternal, omniscient, omnipotent being who is God, trying to understand this mystery as being limited, finite human beings, it's understandable that we wouldn't be able to totally understand it, but we can grow in our understanding. For instance, an analogy I like to use: if we're standing on the shore, looking out over the ocean, we would say this is quite a body of water. It's immense. It's incredible how big it is. But standing on the shore of the ocean, we're seeing a very small part of the body of the ocean. We know there's far more out there that we can't see. Well, trying to understand divine mystery is kind of like that.
It's a beautiful analogy. Beautiful. Holy Thursday, that Mass is also very special to priests, right? Because it's that night that we see the institution of the priesthood.
Sure, the institution of the priesthood. Jesus said he had the 12, even including Judas. And he said, in the context of the Seder meal, the Passover supper, it was an interesting Pope Benedict XVI, in dealing with the Synoptic Gospels and John's Gospel don't seem to correspond with the actual date of the Passover. And Pope Benedict XVI, in a book, Jesus of Nazareth, pointed out that Jesus celebrated his own Passover. So it was in connection with the sacrifice of the lambs, but that date was not that important to him. What was important that he was expressing his own Passover and the sacrifice for the salvation of the world.
Sure. The altar on Holy Thursday has far more ciboria than normal. There's a bunch of ciborium on the altar. Why is there so many hosts consecrated on Holy Thursday?
If you don't have a large container like this container, in some parishes this would suffice.
Sure.
But for those who have smaller ciboria containers for the Eucharist, we have to keep them full because Mass is not celebrated on Good Friday anywhere in the world. And so what takes place is the celebration of Good Friday, celebrating the passion and death of Christ. What takes place following that, after general intercessions, is a simple communion service. And so the consecration of additional host on Holy Thursday is so that we can have that communion service.
So after communion on Holy Thursday, there is usually a procession throughout the church, and then the Eucharist is taken to a place of repose, and there's no dismissal. The priest just kind of walks away. Why is that? Why it kind of leaves us hanging in a sense?
Well, it's not the end of the liturgy. It's the 3-day liturgy, the 3 days. So after the procession and the reposition of the Blessed Sacrament and the invitation for people to spend a little time in recollection of Jesus' agony, time in the garden and his agony in the garden. And of course, his disciples all fall asleep on him. But it's a time for us to be like those disciples and pray with Jesus before he experiences his passion and death. And we remember that on Good Friday and celebrate that.
Are there ways that you can think of off the top of your head that once we leave that celebration at the church, that we can kind of carry it with us to our home? Is there some kind of practice that we could possibly do in our home that you can think of that just ties us to what's happening that night?
Well, certainly. Well, a lot of people leave right after Holy Thursday, but I would actually encourage people to stay and pray for some time. And then just to remember that celebration and think about the day to come in the celebration of the Good Friday. You know, you can do their regular prayers, rosary or office of readings or devotional prayers or whatever they do at home. But I would say to remember the context of the Holy Thursday and the Lord's Supper, his sacrifice at the Mass, and how we recall his death on the cross for our salvation. As I tell people a lot, he didn't need to do that. We needed him to do that. Jesus didn't need salvation. We needed salvation. And so to ponder how powerful that experience was for us, and still is.
What a beautiful message as we enter into this sacred time of the Triduum. And once again, I appreciate you taking time to be with us here today to talk about this first of the...
Well, this is great because it gives an opportunity to speak with people out there who are watching this video.
And you'll be at St. Anne's Cathedral tonight for the celebration of the Lord's Supper, correct?
Oh, of course. I'll be presiding at it with Father Xavier will be joining, and Deacon Tom Miller will also be on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bishop.
You're welcome.